We're going to jump right in because we definitely want to keep to our schedule today. And let me say that there will be ample time for a nice coffee break after, I think, the next panel. And good time for schmoozing then, which I know is part of this. I want to welcome Amy Cappellazzo to the stage from Sotheby's. I think we have to commend her on her awesome sneakers, great shoes. So, you know, so much about these panels are a real effort to kind of hear from the panelists, but I want to start by just kind of giving you a litany of some of the things that that Sotheby's has been doing since Amy got there that kind of seems to qualify her in my book as a disruptor of sorts. Sotheby's acquired your art advisory business in 2016, and since then you have brought Christy McClear from the Robert Rauschenberg Foundation to expand the advisory services for living artists and estates and foundations. You hired an art fraud expert to start a scientific research department, acquired an online marketplace for interior design, hired Richard Vibert to become the firm's big data and blockchain guru, and Thread Genius, a firm that provides e-commerce businesses with artificial intelligence, and the list goes on. So I wanted to just start by saying kind of what is behind this strategy. Is it a strategy to kind of consciously redefine an auction house?
Well, I mean, yes. Business, you know, these are very old businesses. They've been functioning a certain way for a very long time. Needless to say, every agency-based business in the world is in some form of disruption, be it travel or insurance or financial services and stockbrokerage. I mean, every agency-based business is being disrupted. So you have to look at what you currently do and figure out what today's tools, technology, et cetera, can give you to sort of diversify what you're doing. But you have to keep doing what you've always done well and make money along the way. So the disruption is sort of incremental and like a practical disruption rather than a revolutionary disruption.
What is wrong with just being an auction house and selling things? Just sticking with that.
Well, I mean, you know, there's nothing wrong with it, but I believe it's like, it's sort of change or die, right? I mean, isn't that sort of how adapt or die as a species? So as a business species in the ecosystem of the art world, we have to constantly change the way we're doing things and trying to do things and use the tools that are before us to enable us to do different things.
One of the things that I think you have a reputation for, and something I've noticed in covering you over the years, is that you are very comfortable talking about art as an asset class. I know there are some people in the art world, and perhaps in this room, who still have some discomfort with that. Why is it that that's a vocabulary that you are comfortable using? I was even on a Sotheby's earnings call, and you were on the call, and that's certainly unusual for someone in your role.
Well, I don't know why I'm comfortable doing it, other than that I feel I understand the concepts well enough to explain or to use them.
Explain them.
Well, I mean, first of all, art is an asset because it's a tangible good that's purchased with cash, with money. So it can be a disposable asset, or it can be an appreciable asset. So happens to be something that has been valued and treasured over time, so we can actually track its appreciability over time. I think it's okay for something to be lots of things. We're all lots of things. So a work of art can be a cultural treasure. A work of art can be a spiritual beacon in your life. It can be fabulous decoration. It can also be an asset appreciating in value. So it's just another way to, just because you know what something's worth doesn't change your other relationships to it. Like a conservator knows a work of art much differently than I do, but it's a respectable way to know something. So if you know it as an asset, it's just another way to know it.
So when you're talking to clients, are you just kind of reaching them where they live, speaking to the way in which art resonates for them? I mean, how do you calibrate that?
Well, you always try to reach people where they live, as they say. I almost never talk about why I like something. I talk about why the market likes it. That's usually what people want to hear. If someone actually asks me why I like it, well, then we should sit and have a coffee and talk. It's a different kind of conversation.
Talk a little bit about what it's been like. You had been in auction houses for many years, and then you went out on your own, and you started this very successful advisory business. what has it been like coming back into the auction world, and just kind of what did you bring with you from that other sphere, and what are some of the growing pains you've experienced in that transition?
Well, I suppose this is the kind of thing I'll assess better in hindsight, but well, I always feel a bit like a character actor in the art market. This is sort of, my job is to talk about, the auction business. I certainly knew a lot about the auction business from my 13 years at Christie's. When I left, I wanted to sort of build a different kind of model and build a different set of services, but bring with me my knowledge and experience from the auction business. And then being acquired by Sotheby's, you wanted to sort of take all of that, all of my past experience and then some of my recent entrepreneurial history and experience and bring it to Sotheby's and kind of mix it all together. But I think each auction house has a little bit of its own character or flavor, and so it's been important to me to be respectful of that and observe it and sort of nurture it to become more of itself,
Is it possible to kind of describe for us how you sort of see the Sotheby's culture compared to the Christie's one you were in for so long?
Well, I mean, every place changes over time, and I'm not sure I probably know at least as much about Christie's as I do about Phillips, even though I've never worked at Phillips, because I know all the people involved at each of the houses. So I think things change over time, but Sotheby's has always been New York-based and publicly traded, and Christie's has been London-based and privately held, so that's a character difference in and of itself as companies go. I think Sotheby's has a much more kind of American mindset and American spirit to it. So what does that mean precisely? Oh, there's all sorts of initiatives for cultural social responsibility and community service and things that sort of are the hallmark of American corporations at the moment. So you see a lot more of that. There's an emphasis on quarterly reporting kind of runs your life because it's a publicly traded company. So all that matters. Christie's is privately held, so there was always much more that I think we were grateful at Christie's in those years not to have to report what Sotheby's had to. Now I'm on the other side, so I know exactly what that feeling is. But I think of the auction houses a little bit like great universities. Like sometimes Harvard represents this, and sometimes Yale represents that, and sometimes it's better to go to, I don't know, Michigan rather than Duke or something. So it's just an era and a time and a cycle, part of the life cycle of the auction house.
There's some who sort of say that a lot of the excitement has gone out of the room to the extent that many collectors are not actually showing up and raising paddles anymore. They are either sending sort of surrogates to bid for them, or they're up in the sky boxes and you can't see them, or they're on the phones quite often. Do you sense that sort of diminution at all in terms of energy or suspense? There's also the guarantees have contributed to that.
Well, I would say it's not about people physically showing, the market's very strong, so it's hard to say people are disenchanted with marketplace or the auction marketplace. I think whether they come themselves or send a representative doesn't really matter precisely to me. So, but I think the market is becoming more efficient. Markets always become more efficient over time. So the use of external capital and third-party guarantees. Now we're going to move into a period where you're starting to see really blended pools of capital for third parties rather than individuals who want to own the work or dealers who have a position in that artist. So that'll be a huge change in the capital structure of deals and things. But that's all toward a greater efficiency. The market wants it. So you have to, I always say the market is like the weather. You can't fight the weather. You can just learn to be smart and predict it a little bit or prepare yourself for it, but you have to sort of go with the force of the market itself.
It makes me wonder, though, if the whole kind of art of attending an auction, there's sort of a theater to it. Is that something that we're eventually going to sort of evolve out of, do you think? It's going to feel sort of like a relic of the past?
Well, I don't know. There's always some... that's the part I like the least, to be honest with you. I'm not really into that part. I like everything that happens before until that moment, and then I just kind of do that moment, and then we just do the next thing.
Why don't you like it?
I don't know. I'm not it's just the part I find the least interesting. Why? I don't know.
because it seems, because by the time it happens, everything that was spontaneous and interesting going into it has already happened.
Right.
So that's just sort of the punctuation mark of the event rather than the content of the sentence, if you will. I don't know. If people want theater, it's good enough. I mean, there's plenty of other forms of theater. But you'll start to see a marketplace trading in real time more. I think it will change. The texture, the structure, again, the flow of capital coming in will change the way an auction feels. So those old days of really the employees of the auction house, nor the room, nor the auctioneer knowing exactly what was going to happen is probably, markets, like again, they just become more efficient.
So when you say a market, we're going to see a market trading in real time, what does that look like?
Well, you'll see, for example, when I'm going through the sale and I'm watching what's happening, I'm tracking each object and the depth of bidding and where the bidding came from and where the flow of capital came from for that artist, for example. So what does that mean? Okay, that was 75% American bidding. Buyer and underbidder both American. That's probably 80% of the capital that was set to be expended on that lot by that evening is still an American-based market. Like I'm watching all that as it's happening. Then I look across the sale and I look for trend lines of like new things happening. So that new artist in an evening sale was a mistake. It was a punt. It was an experiment. Didn't prove to be successful. This one, on the other hand, we'll only see more of it. Or that's a market that's topped now. We're going to start to see it. That's a market that I would short for the next sale or something.
So you're getting information.
Yeah, definitely. But so then you see all that real-time information in the room because you know more as it's happening. It's no longer this just like willy-nilly live theatrical experience. You can sort of deduce and discern what the next move or maneuver is in the market that should happen.
I've always been amazed to learn how much you've done in advance. How pretty much an auctioneer, for example, knows exactly where to look in the room, who's going to be bidding. There aren't actually that many surprises, which is why we sort of all watched for that one moment when somebody raises their hand and we have no idea who they are or whatever it may be.
I'll never forget about 10 years ago, I was at Christie's at the time, and I invited a friend of mine, a very beloved art historian that many in the room will know, Robert Pincus Witten, who recently passed away. And he was sitting in the room for the sale, and and after the sale, he came over and said, "That was so amazing. That was so great." He goes, "Did you really know what was going to happen?" I said, "Yeah, actually, I knew what was going to happen." He goes, "So you're telling me it's like porn? It's all scripted in advance?" And I started laughing. So it was very, very Robert kind of comment, but it was
apt.
Apt, totally.
It actually has struck me that you have now kind of risen in the field. You're sort of at the top of your game and high ranking at Sotheby's, but you're also still on the phones along with kind of everyone else. So why is that? Is that your choice? And what is that experience like? And I think it might be helpful just to sort of say, what are you doing on the phone? And why do you need to still do that?
Well, I consider it part of the job, right? I think it's my job to be with my colleagues making the sale a success in whatever way I can. I'm talking often to clients I have a long-time relationship with, so it feels very easy and natural, and there's a sort of warmth and familiarity of phone bidding together, doing things over the years. So, but I definitely like roll up my sleeves. I'm that kind of person. So,
is there some sort of fun to it? And
is there a way?
Do you enjoy it at all?
Yes, I can enjoy it. It's as good as the person I'm talking to and how it's going. Yeah.
And what about the online question where, I mean, to some extent you were in the vanguard of really testing that market with your Warhol experiment. Can you talk a little bit about what that was like and how it sort of proved out? This was sort of lower end Warhol stuff that you...
Could I just say one thing about phone bidding again?
Sure, go back.
So I was just thinking, whenever I'm on the phone bidding with someone, particularly if I know they're going to buy it, like if they're the profile of person who's likely to chase it and buy it, I try to remember and think that this is going to be one of the highest moments in their life. And so it's kind of a privilege to be a part of that, right? But I try to think that like this is going to be a moment they really remember, and how would I help them remember it very favorably or fondly? and that's part of the job.
Right, so
That's
it may
actually a
not be
pleasure to
momentous to you, but you know it is to them.
Sorry?
It may not be momentous to you because you do it all the time, but to them it's huge.
Well, I guess. So the online stuff, here's the truth. It costs a lot of money to sell things online. Might cost more than it costs to sell them like in a conventional way. But it's still something you're building and growing, and I think there's certainly no turning back, and everyone understands that that's the future, particularly for the broader marketplace of lower price point items.
Why is it worth it if it's lower price, though? It's sort of a lot of energy and effort and resources.
I mean, you never want to cede certain parts of the volume of your marketplace. I mean, none of the auction houses can sit around and wait for $50 million pictures to show up. Like, that's not really paying the, it's not really paying the bills to just wait for the big pictures. Because they're, those masterpieces are masterpieces because they're very rare. So they don't appear or get made daily. But the marketplaces of photographs and prints, some of the more collectible, like watches, jewelry, wine, et cetera, that all belongs in an online marketplace. I think we're all very comfortable transacting and buying things online. And even unique works of art at a certain price point probably don't calculate a certain risk. But I do think big things at the high end are still live experiences. Like, you want that to be a live experience. Like, when you're on the phone, you want to remember it a certain way.
That's exciting. We're going to go to questions in a few minutes, so please have them. And let's make them questions, not statements. But it does also, one of the things that has always struck me is that you're a good salesperson. You know how to close a deal.
You know what? I'm a good salesperson. Thank you.
Can you share any of what your approach is or strategy, or why it has worked for you over the years? How it is that you can kind of make somebody buy something that's incredibly expensive and maybe more than they thought they were going to spend in the first place?
I'd like to, that's like, I could sort of get offended and say that's highly reductive of what I do, what my talents are, but I don't mind being a good salesperson. I think, I only want to sell something to someone that they want. Like, I have to believe that it's best for them. So whether they know it or not is another matter, but I really like to think, here's an object, here's a person, this is like something that's meant to happen in the universe. So I have to really believe that. There are things I absolutely can't sell.
Really? Like what?
Yeah. I have a hard time selling things in bad condition. Like, that's really tough for me. There's certain artists I'm better at selling because obviously I have a passion for them, or I know the market better, or I've nurtured the market's growth and can speak to it better. That's the strength of our wonderful team, is like everyone has a little bit of a blind spot with a particular artist or a particular period, but if you have a very good team, you cover all your blind spots.
Questions out there on the aisle? Yes, in the glasses. Yes, you. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. My name is Lina. I'd like to ask you, please, about the role of auction houses in preventing illicit trafficking of stolen arts as well as antiquities. And what does Sotheby do in order to provide a full chain of unbroken ownership of the pieces that you would be auctioning? Thank you.
Okay, well, certainly I can tell you that Sotheby's has an enormous compliance department, and part of compliance, part of that is from being a publicly traded company, and part of that is to look after and oversee that the objects we're selling were rightfully obtained and are correct in authenticity, or are what they purport to be in that way. So I can tell you that consumes lots and lots of people's time. I think it's always surprising to people, particularly for people like myself who are on I'm essentially from the 20th century, so there's very little antiquities or stolen things we deal with per se, compared to, say, earlier fields. It's always surprising how few things there are that actually pass through that are not right or not good. Curiously, each auction house has a representation and warranty. It's generally about 5 years. The biggest issue is when something was bought 10 or 15 years ago and scholarship has changed, or a particular country's laws have changed, or patrimony laws have changed, etc. That's usually when the issue occurs, when something was sold long ago, but the either reigning scholarship or legal status of the object has changed. But it keeps plenty of lawyers extremely well employed, and there's no end to it, so it will certainly be something I think all the auction houses seek to do. Certainly brand reputation depends on being honorable in these moments, and I think you've seen my colleagues from the other houses all be very honorable on this point as well.
Yes, sir, right there, with his pen in the air.
The one with the pen, that's you. Hi.
We can hear you.
Price of contemporary art continue to escalate. I mean, it's increased dramatically over the last 2 decades, but is there an end point in sight over the next decade, 2 decades, or even a shorter amount of time to the escalation of prices of the works by living artists, even quite young ones?
Well, living artists, I mean, I have said publicly that I felt that the market for emerging artists is oversubscribed of capital. And I still believe that. I mean, a young artist who's 28 years old, who's just gotten their 2nd or 3rd show under their belt shouldn't be trading for $200,000. Like, there's sort of a, the escalation of entry-level price points and the sort of quick rise on that first round speculation there's just too much capital chasing those kinds of works. I think that's going to be a very volatile area of the market for a long time, because the art market loves youth and beauty. It loves young artists. It loves the living. So there'll always be that seduction of a new talent or a new voice. I think you will see, I mean, certainly certain markets feel like they're becoming mature in value. Others are not mature at all yet. The amount of capital in the world today chasing these objects continues to grow, but the rate of great objects being made for them to chase is probably staying the same, or arguably shrinking as things are gifted to museums and things of that sort. So I don't suspect, popular wisdom would say trees won't grow to the sky, but I think the market is still very much with us, and it will be artist-specific as it moves on.
How much is scarcity an issue? I mean, you kind of hear how difficult it is to source the best stuff. It's very sort of thin at the top. Is that always going to be the case? I mean, does it worry you every season? I mean, I think if you say, what's the universe of people that can pay $50 million for a painting? Okay, that's a pretty small group of people. What of those people, how many of them want this object? How many of them are focused at this moment on this object? Meaning they can afford it, but there's other things. So, it's always thin at the top. It's thin at the top of nearly every market. But the art market, particularly the contemporary art market, has become an alternative asset class, and it is a great diversifier of wealth, and it has been an excellent store of capital, and people have had incredible returns in it. And it's hard to think of other things you can buy that have the chance of going up in value because it has a global marketplace interested in it. Not stocks, not real estate, not certain startup things, speculative ventures, etc. Still a good investment. We have time for one more question. Anybody in the back? Yes.
Hi, Amy.
Hi.
Good to see you again. A couple of years ago, when Sotheby announced the acquisition of an art partner agency, one of the concern people have is that the conflict interest. So 2 years after, how have you been doing to avoid that, and how do you make sure your clients are comfortable when you are giving the best advice while trying to achieve the sales target from Sotheby as a public listing company, as you mentioned? Thank you.
Well, I think there's conflicts. I mean, I always sort of generally have said, if there's not a conflict of interest, it's probably not worth doing. So, anything worth doing probably has its set of conflicts. It's how you manage conflicts. So, I think I would say it's working very well. I mean, in our advisory practice, my partner, Alan Schwartzman, has not had he's probably not slept in his own bed 2 nights in a row in a very long time. Like, it's very busy. We have lots of new clients, lots going on. I think if you reveal what the conflicts are, and as they say, sunlight is the best disinfectant, and you show the world what the conflicts are and show how you're managing them, I think that's effective. Certainly our advisory group has lots of separate servers, lots of things that distinguish it from the broader Sotheby's and still retains that independence. And some clients were concerned, and other clients thought, oh my God, they're going to have the best information and flow of all, so now I really want to work with them. So it sort of depends. I mean, certainly the banking industry is one that is rife with conflicts, presumably, but has various built-in Chinese walls to protect it, to protect private equity from private wealth management or something like that. So.
Okay, I want to thank Amy, thank all of you.